Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the She's Got GAWL podcast. This is brought to you by the West Georgia Chapter of the Georgia Association for Women Lawyers. We are on Spotify and other social media platforms like YouTube. So if you were to just go to Spotify and search for She's Got GAWL, or go to YouTube and search for West Georgia GAWL, you will find a listing of all of the programming that we've done so far, and we encourage you to like and subscribe. This is a continuation of our series, Lessons Learned from Women Who Lead, and it's going to be a fabulous interview. I can't wait to dive into it. But just to give it a little bit of context, this is a series that our members requested. When we were considering our programming for the membership year, one of the questions we put out was, what is it you want to hear about? What is it that you think you need? What do you think will be helpful? And it kept coming back as, we want to know more about leadership. We want to know how to be more effective leaders, how to advance in our careers, and how to move the needle forward for all the things that we're trying to do. And that's really what birthed this series. And tonight, y'all, we have a special guest. We have the Honorable Shalanda Miller with us. And when I say honorable, I mean the Honorable Judge Shalanda Miller. I want to give her a proper introduction, and then we're going to dive right into part 5. This will be, part 5 of our leadership series. But Judge Shalanda Miller is a Fulton County Juvenile Court judge navigating family dependency and delinquency matters in the very delicate family circumstances. She is the associate judge serving parents with substance abuse disorders on the Family Dependency Treatment Court, which provides an alternative to the adversarial approach traditionally used in dependency cases and is designed to preserve the family through court intervention and services. Judge Miller was integral in the effort to define court operations and procedures to prevent a disruption of court functions during the COVID-19 pandemic. She has helped identify opportunities for efficiencies in court operations, draft policies, and form orders to better serve the children and families involved with the court. Judge Miller has also led the effort in training and developing summer judicial interns to accelerate their learning curve, inspire them to a career of service. Prior to joining the Fulton County Juvenile Court, Judge Miller was the Deputy Division Chief for Litigation and Claims in the City of Atlanta Department of Law. She also served as an associate Fulton County Magistrate Judge and as a staff attorney in Clayton and Fulton counties. Judge Miller started her legal career as a litigation associate at Weinstock and Scavo PC, and that's a mid-sized law firm in the Buckhead area of Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to law school, Judge Miller was a business consultant with Ernst & Young LLP and Capgemini LLC based in Atlanta, Georgia. She advised local, national, and international clients on operational best practices, software automation, and customer relationship management. Judge Miller obtained her law degree from the Emory University School of Law, where she was a member of the Emory Moot Court Society and earned a spot on the Society's national team. She was also a class representative and a 1L mentor. Judge Miller obtained her Bachelor of Science degree in psychology with a mathematical science minor from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she was a Moorhead, now Moorhead Kane, scholar, active in her sorority Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and deeply involved in campus leadership. Judge Miller graduated from Deerfield Academy in Deerfield, Massachusetts, and was a recipient of the school's highest honor, which is the Deerfield Cup. Judge Miller resides in Southwest Atlanta with her husband, Dave, and daughters, Sienna and Sheridan, and their dog, Romeo. Please welcome the Honorable Judge Shalanda Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, talking to our GAWL membership and other folks learning about leadership, and to have the chance to share the things that I've learned over the course of my career to hopefully accelerate the learning curve for young lawyers of color, young women lawyers, because we need more in the pipeline for sure. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. And what I didn't mention, and we'll get back to it, in your bio is that you also currently serve as the GAWL Foundation president, which is the philanthropic arm of our organization. And I want to talk to you about that a little bit. But I read in your bio that you want to inspire people to a career of service. And so I was thinking, sort of, as I was contemplating our conversation tonight, and I was like, a lot of people don't see it that way, but I feel like being a judge is really an answer to serve, right? It's an answer to the call of service. Like, there's a lot of, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but there's a lot of pomp and circumstance involved. People got to stand up when you come in the room. They can't sit down until you tell them to. And that's part of it, right? Because it's necessary. That honors our system of government. But really, judges are public servants. And so when people like you step up and say, you know what, I have a law degree, and in your case, you have several degrees, and you were a consultant, and you've done all the things. You could be somewhere making a boatload of money and living a certain lifestyle, that would make a lot of people envious. But rather than do that, you have answered the call to serve. And I think that is so commendable. So thank you so much for that. We are honored to have you on. And I mentioned GAWL Foundation, so I'll pivot to that really, really quickly, because I think it's important. I know that there are a number of initiatives that you lead as the president of the foundation. And if you wanted to speak to just what some of those are really quickly, so that people know, they might want to, figure out how they can be of service or make contributions or maybe volunteer, who knows?
Well, and so when we're talking about leadership, it is important, especially for lawyers. And so you hit on something when you were talking about it being a service career. Law is a service career. We serve clients, we serve the community. And as lawyers and representatives of the court, it is so important that we make ourselves available to our neighbors and community members in the form of service. When I started with GAWL, the first committee I was on was the Community Service Committee on the foundation. Okay. And that's where I started. And from there has grown this wonderful opportunity to interact with other women, at the time when I was a young lawyer, judges, and other leaders in the community. And so when you talk about leadership, service has got to be a part of that conversation. In order for us to be effective leaders, we have to be effective servants. And that's in every form, right? That is in the form of community service, which is where I started with GAWL. But that's also, when we're serving clients, or in the role as a judge, when I am serving the litigants before the court, it is all an act of helping move our community's cases, different matters that come before you forward, and doing that with a servant's heart. And so leadership requires service, and GAWL Foundation is the service arm of GAWL. And we do, we have all sorts of community service events that we organize for our membership. We have a partnership with the Nicholas House. Every second Tuesday of the month, we serve dinner at the Nicholas House. And I welcome all participants. We do a lot of projects with the house, and we're hoping this year we can do some art projects for we're going to be back in person for our annual dinner for our silent auction. So we're getting that rolling. So that's one part of what we do. But then we also serve through grants to other community organizations and nonprofits who are helping women and children with legal services throughout our community. And everybody knows there's not enough money to go around for nonprofits. Right. And so we do what we can to fill that gap. And then the third way we serve is by giving scholarships to deserving law students. And they're not huge, large scholarships, but they help young folks. So for example, 3Ls, if they're trying to just fill the gap between graduation and taking the bar, or if they during a 2L during the year need money for books. So these are all ways that we as women lawyers are able to give back to our community, and the GAWL Foundation is primarily responsible for that.
That's fantastic. I'm thinking that that's some of the most important work that we can do as lawyers is serve our community. And I know that this is a leadership topic, so I'll pivot to that. But what I wanted to ask you, So as a judge, obviously you're called on to lead different kinds of groups of people. You've got to lead your courtroom. You've got to lead the lawyers in the courtroom per se, right? You have to lead your team. You're a leader in the community. And there's a number of like different personalities, a number of different perspectives that I'm sure you're called on to corral and move forward, right? And one of the things that I'll say is I'm probably not the only lawyer who has encountered someone who we knew before they took the bench and knew them after, and they were not as recognizable, right? And what I mean is there was just something about ascending to the bench that seemed to sort of change their personality, or maybe it revealed it. I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. And I said to myself, I said, well, you know what? Let's think about this from another perspective, because I've never been a judge. I've never, had the situation where people have to stand up when I walk in a room. I've never been able to sign my name and change the trajectory of someone's family life. And so I would like to think that if I ever, got that kind of authority, that I would be the same person, but I don't know. But what I can say is unequivocally, without a doubt, you are one of the most humble, most approachable, most caring people that we have on the bench right now. And it's not just me, the lawyers who have the pleasure of knowing you and working with you and coming before you, we all know it. And we're always kind of, because lawyers, lawyers talk.
I know. I know.
But I was wondering, as a judge and having ascended to that level, how is it that you are still that person with that temperament that's approachable, the humility that people feel comfortable calling on you for things or seeking out your advice, even outside the courtroom, or the person who they know, if I go before Judge Miller, even if I don't like the outcome, I'm going to get a fair shake?
Thank you. That is wonderful to hear, because whenever people stand up in my courtroom, I'm always like, sit down, sit down, sit down. And I understand the respect for the system. And so I do try to conform to the norms a little bit. But one of the things that as a judge is very important to me is accessibility. And I mean that on a lot of different levels, right, but mostly just on the level of people feeling comfortable and able to really talk so they can really get their feelings out and really be heard and be seen. Due process is the most fundamental part of our legal system. Right. And you can't have due process if people are intimidated or shy, they don't speak up. You need to create an environment where people feel comfortable. And I'm glad to know that I do that, because it is very important to me, because I feel like that's one of the ways that we get real access to justice, and one of the ways we break down some of the barriers and anxiety that comes with going to court. And I think the other part of it is I am Shalanda. People, now that I'm a judge, people will say, Judge Miller, I'm like, you knew me when I was Shalanda. And I think some of the reason you see people change a bit is this is a very isolating position. It is not a position that I can't talk about cases. Right. Like I have to either talk to other judges or nobody, because I can't talk about cases. I don't if you're a lawyer and you're in a firm, you get to go back after court and decompress and download. Right. I don't have that. The judges get together, but they're very busy too. And so we don't get together every day. Like we don't see each other every day and just kind of download our days. And so it is an isolating position. And so I think sometimes that makes that creates a wall and a boundary. But what I
Mhm.
try to do is be a reflection of what I want to see in the community, right? I want people to approach me. I want people to know that I'm listening. And so I can't be in the community introducing myself as Judge Shalanda Miller. I mean, I guess I could, technically I could. But that's very off-putting, right? Like it's
Right. Right.
off-putting. And it establishes something when you introduce yourself that way.
Right.
Versus if
Right.
you just say, hey, I'm Shalanda, nice to meet you. Who are you?
Right.
I don't force up any barriers. I allow whatever the natural course of the conversation and relationship is to develop. And I think it's very important that we get away from some of that, because I think some of that formality is why you see the distrust and
Mhm.
the lack of understanding of what happens in a courtroom.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I try. I am Shalanda. I
Yeah.
have been Shalanda, and some people know me better than others, but I've been Shalanda for a long time, a lot
Yeah.
longer than I've been a judge. And so I hope that Shalanda comes through more times than not. And be clear, there are times when Judge Miller has to make an appearance,
Right.
especially in the courtroom setting, to set some boundaries sometimes. But for the most part, I want my courtroom to always be open and conversational, accessible, where people feel like they can let their guard down and we can really get to the bottom of things, the truth of matters,
Mhm.
the root
Mhm.
causes of issues that bring folks before the court, so that we can get to some real solutions.
Right. Right. So you mentioned something very important about accessibility and approachability and all of those things. Um, I would imagine though that some of this you kind of is your personality, and maybe some of it is kind of been honed over time as you've had to lead different groups of people. And I certainly don't think that you would have ascended to the role that you are without some level of mentorship. Is
Mm.
mentorship still important after you become a judge? Is
Oh,
it less
absolutely.
important, more important?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because it is important at every stage of your development,
Okay.
all the way from, I think, from high school until death,
Okay.
right? Because you think about it, when you come into the role of a judge, you have the experiences that you brought with you from your learning over time and your different positions in your career,
Right.
but you don't necessarily know all of the things.
Yeah.
And so I have I am so blessed and fortunate. My chief judge is my mentor now, my direct day-to-day mentor. So if I'm like, I have a question, or I'm like, this fact and this law, I don't love the way that's meshing. Somebody I need to hash it out, download with.
Mm-hmm.
That is who
Mm-hmm.
I go to. Advice about what classes and courses I should be taking, what next things do I need to do to make myself more effective. I go to her and I talk to her. But then I also have a group of mentors that I'm asking for career advice.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm thinking of taking another step. How should I approach this? Who are the people I should talk to? What should I do to prepare? So I have mentors now, and I imagine and that I will have them always.
Yeah.
And I for any young people watching, and even newer lawyers, are middle of your career lawyers, just remember that you have something to give and bring at every level of your development. I was
Mm-hmm.
um, I was fortunate. The Southern Region Black Law Students Association asked me to moderate a panel. The panel was fantastic. It was former Chief Justice Harold Melton,
Oh.
current Justice Berta Colvin,
Oh.
um, Judge Hatchett.
Whoa.
Right? Listen, I'm in the
Whoa.
room and I'm fangirling the whole time. I'm like, ooh, ooh.
That's
And it
fantastic.
was fantastic. Oh, and Carlos Moore, Judge Carlos Moore out of
Wow.
Mississippi. Like it was,
Yes.
he's the head of the NBA.
Right.
Um, it was a fantastic group room
Wow.
to just be in the space.
Sure.
And one of the young people he was talking about how difficult it is to find a mentor. And I was like, look, y'all, you see all these people connect with somebody here. But then remember that you are a 3L. There's a 1L that needs some guidance. Or a college kid.
That
or a college kid that needs some guidance. First generation law student who has no idea what to do. And that's how you start developing your leadership skills. You start developing where you are.
Yeah.
You take the opportunities where you are to share the knowledge that you've learned. And that's leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about your mentors. What's some advice that you got from a mentor that you took to heart and you still use today? And then conversely, maybe some advice that you got that you didn't take that you wish you had.
Oh, that's a good one. It's one that I really, really remember when I started at the Fulton County Attorney's Office. I transitioned from private practice to the county attorney's office. Very different mode of practicing law, a lot more collegial because we weren't doing hours, right? So people were open to share and exchange ideas. And my county attorney at the time, David Ware, said to me, he said, treat this like it is your own private practice. Like you are a sole practitioner and everything that you do, you are building your business. And that was so important. And I have taken that with me. And I guess it could mean a lot of different things to different people, depending on how you take it.
Right.
But basically what he was saying is your work is a reflection of you.
Right.
If you were building a business, what would you want that business to be made of?
Right.
What would you want the reputation of your business to be in the legal community? And treat this like that. Because it's not, we weren't getting bonuses and fancy salaries, but we had, I think, some of the most important work that you can do because we were protecting taxpayers and employees and citizens on a day-to-day basis. So that's important work.
Yeah.
Even if you don't get paid the big, big time money.
It is. And what about advice that you got that you didn't take, that you wish you had taken?
That one's tough too, because I'll tell you this, I think a part of being able to grow is taking it, not being afraid to take advice, even if sometimes it's not what you would necessarily do yourself.
Right.
To try something out. And I don't know. And so I guess the thing not advice that I didn't take, but maybe a style of practicing that I didn't attach myself to. My law firm, I worked with a brilliant man, Michael Weinstock. He was the named partner at the firm. And my first year, the office right next to his was open. And I should have known that it was a setup because who wouldn't want to sit next to the named partner? But it was a reason it was open because Michael was tough.
Really?
And the person that sat in that office got, he could call through the wall to you. And so he did often call through the wall. And he was fantastic and creative and thoughtful and really a person that pushed the bounds of the law. But he was also very aggressive. And I watched his style and I was like, I can finesse this. And so it wasn't necessarily advice that I didn't take, but it was a way of practicing law that I watched, and I took the things that I thought would benefit me and allow me to be my authentic self and practice law, and be successful. And I was telling somebody the other day, I learned the practice of law from Michael. And I don't know people always realize that this is an art. It is. It's not just, I guess there's some areas of law that you can be like that, but I feel like for litigators, that's not the case. It's an art form.
Right.
You learn how to perform before a jury. You learn how to moderate your tone when you're talking in a negotiation to pull out
Mhm.
more of the things that you want. So it is an art. And I learned the art from
Yeah.
Mr. Weinstock, and took aspects of his tools and I retooled them for me. So maybe that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good one. That's a really good one. Taking the parts that pertain to you, but remaining your authentic self.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Um, because I guess it might have been Oprah or somebody who said you can be a better version of yourself than you can be of anybody else.
Anybody else?
And I think that's especially true for lawyers because,
Mhm.
like you said, we're serving so many different people. It'll come through if you're not your authentic self.
Yeah.
People can tell, and you've got
And
this.
it makes like this is already a stressful business. And if you
Mhm.
are showing up with full makeup and costume every day, that's
Yeah.
got to be even more exhausting.
Oh, for
And
sure.
so,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and I know sometimes, especially as women, right?
Mhm.
Especially as women, and when you're a young woman,
Mhm.
there's the
Mhm.
temptation that you have to be a way to be successful.
Sure. Sure.
I, I, I don't think it's true. I
Yeah.
think you've got to be the way that allows you to be happy and joyful and doing the work,
Right.
and advocating for your clients, but not in a way that compromises who you are or where you are. Like I said, getting made up in full makeup and costume every day to the
Right.
point that it just becomes an exhausting load to
Yeah.
bear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's some great advice. It takes some of us longer than others to kind of get to that point,
Mhm.
but I
For
feel like
sure.
when we get there, that is the essence of the path to true happiness.
Yep.
But as a judge, I'm sure you've had to redirect some folks that you were leading, right? I'm gonna go out on a
Listen,
limb and say
listen, it is so, yes, of course,
that.
because and it's so funny to me. Like people still mansplain me. Like,
Mm,
well, Judge, you know the law is.
mm,
I too
mm.
am familiar with the law. I too am familiar. And I laugh about it. And what I really, really try to do is to remember that I can't introduce any level of extra anxiety in these situations, especially in juvenile court, because the
Sure.
reasons that we are in before the court are often very, very serious, traumatic, and me getting in my feelings about somebody mansplaining me. Um, it doesn't help the situation out. So I really make every effort to not be
Right.
bothered by those things and to not allow those things to detract from the issues and legal basis before me. But it is funny sometimes. Like sometimes I will sometimes say, I too studied law. I do know, in fact, what the law says.
And they're like,
Um,
oh,
yeah,
their
like
nerve.
just like try to gentle nudge, like,
And
okay.
they know yeah,
Um,
tapping on
and
that
every now and
bond.
then, like I've had a dad, he blessed me out.
Oh
Like
my.
now we were on, and so this is the other part. Zoom, I think, makes folks a little, I think for our young people, it makes them more comfortable. And I feel like my communication with our young folks has been a lot better on Zoom because I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
the technology
Mm-hmm.
and being on the phone, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
technology they're comfortable with
Sure.
versus coming
Sure.
in and I'm sitting up on the bench. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I think this is a very good tool for our young people. And I feel like it has helped them feel more comfortable with the court process. But I also feel like for some litigants, there's no, like, if you're in my courtroom and you bless me out, there's a sheriff's deputy there
Mm-hmm.
with a
Mm-hmm.
gun and a
Mm-hmm.
taser and handcuffs, and they have a
Mm-hmm.
room in the back that they'll take you to.
Right, right.
But if you're on Zoom, we
Yeah.
can remove you from the meeting, but that's
Right.
like the worst thing that's going to happen. Oh,
Right.
and he was giving it to me, and I can take that. But when he started talking about the service that he was getting from the court staff and the attorneys working the case, I shut it down then. And I probably got a little aggressive. And Judge Shalanda showed up and kind of, put the hammer down or the gavel down. I never banged my gavel. I don't even have my gavel on the bench with me ever. It is on a little plaque on the wall. But I did have to kind of, pull him back down to earth, because we work hard. And I truly believe that for the most part, attorneys are working hard to serve their clients the very best they can. And we are in an extremely stressful business, and to have somebody, demeaning us as individuals that's not something I am going to tolerate in my courtroom for sure. So I did have to bring Judge Miller out, and he apologized.
I'm sure he did.
But it had to, I had to go full mommy mode is probably the best way to say it. I gave him the whole look and everything, like, oh no,
we're not doing
no, sir. So that it does happen.
You are a leader in our community, an awesome public servant. But if you had to say, and I'm sure there are a number of people, but we don't have a whole lot of time, but who is a leader that you admire and why?
This is probably going to be very, very, very cliche, but my parents.
Oh, I love that.
Listen, these are just working class folks. They just work. And they grounded us in church. So I grew up in South Central LA when it was South Central LA. Now it's South LA. I grew up in South Central LA back in the 90s. And so there were lots of things going on in South Central LA in the 90s that could distract a young person from excellence.
Sure.
And my parents they were very, very purposeful in making sure that we were occupied with things that were building leaders. We were at church. We were involved in youth ministry, usher board. I started volunteering, feeding our community at 8 or 9 years old. Actively out working the soup kitchens on Skid Row with my dad, because it was important to him that we understood that even though we were working class, we had roof, we had food, we had clothes. Like I never knew I was working class until it was a working class family until I got older, because we didn't want for anything.
Right.
And we stayed in our community working. And that to me, these are the first servants I saw. These are the first activists I saw. These are the first community organizers, because they were out getting out the vote. So to me, it was the foundations of my values. And to me, that's leadership, right? Never required a lot of accolades or fanfare, just did the work. And that's so important. I think it is sometimes lacking in our leaders today. People want to be recognized for what they're doing instead of just doing it.
Right.
And there's a ton to get done. And there's a ton to get done right next door. And that's just how my parents, that's how they raised and developed us. And so if I had to pinpoint where it started, I mean, of course, it's easy to say your parents, but not because they were actively engaged in making sure we were good citizens. It wasn't by chance.
Right. Right. That's beautiful. And from that, they produced a judge. How about that?
And my mom listen, if you ask my mom, I'm not just a judge, I'm a Supreme Court justice, because she's just claiming it. Like she's like, no, it's coming. I'm like, that's not what the kind of judge I want to be. That's not the kind of judge I want to be.
I'm with your mom on that. I'm with your mom. And that was actually a perfect dovetail to my next question, probably my last. But when did you know Judge Miller, that this was going to be your path? Like, you've done a ton of stuff. I read the bio. You have a wealth of experience, impeccable credentials. But when did you know that you wanted to be a judge?
So it goes back to my dad. He used to make us study Black history. He has always felt like there was not enough acknowledgement of our history and past in schools. And so we studied Black history at home on Saturdays, and we would watch Eyes on the Prize. And we've started watching it with our girls because I think it is very important.
Absolutely.
A very important aspect of history. But as a lawyer, and so let's tell you a story. So we watched Eyes on the Prize. And for folks that don't know, Eyes on the Prize, it follows the development of the civil rights movement. But more for me, what I took from it was the partnership between the churches and the activists and the civil rights leaders and the lawyers. The lawyers who strategically work together to end segregation in the South. And we've got lots of work to do. Like, don't get me wrong, the work is not done. But that type of social engineering, which is what it was, right? Like they manifest a future for us,
right?
For their future generations. They manifest that out of the law that already existed. It was already written,
right?
And a strategy and working together as a community. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
It's beautiful.
They changed the world. They changed the world with the law. I was like, oh, so how can I be that? And that's when it started. So I was probably maybe 9 or 10 years old. And while I had other things that I did, so I was a consultant for 6+ years. And I was really just tired of school. I needed a break. And I was planning to take a couple of gap years before going to law school. Ended up really loving the work I was doing, meeting a lot of wonderful people, solving a lot of interesting issues and concerns within some of our country's largest businesses. It was fun. It was fun, good, thoughtful work. And so I just did it longer than I anticipated. But eventually I was like, oh, okay, this is not my purpose. And so I've got to get in line with what my real purpose is so that I can start moving towards the ultimate goal. And so that's when I knew. And I just got a little off track. But I came on back and got it together.
And we are so glad you did. So glad you came back. And I will second that. Eyes on the Prize is phenomenal for anybody listening or watching who hasn't seen it. If you have children, definitely, I think it's great to share with your children. And even if you don't, just to watch for yourself, it is extremely well done. And it goes over and above as far as a lot of the little nuances and insights that you get from that particular series that are not found in some of the other stories that are told about that part of history. So I definitely recommend it. We're going to wrap, but I do have one final question. And it's not really a question about leadership per se, unless you want to make it so. But I'm curious. You are one of the beloved judges of our community. You're one of our beloved public servants. You're just a great all-around person.
Thank you.
And you have a wealth of experience and knowledge and impeccable credentials. What is one thing that you would like to end on? What is it something you think that, and it doesn't have to be about leadership necessarily, that might be helpful for our audience? Anything that you think is, worth sharing and ending this conversation on?
There's like 1,000 things. Like we could talk forever about just leadership, about being a lawyer and being purposeful. But I think the most important thing, and you said this earlier, be happy. Choose what makes you happy. I think oftentimes, we're lawyers, I'm a judge, but I'm a lawyer by training, and pretty type A personalities, right? We plan things out,
Sure.
very, very detail oriented. And so, if the plan gets off track, or if what we thought was going to make us happy is not making us happy, it's difficult for us to pivot sometimes. And
Absolutely.
I encourage you not to leave the law, because there's so many things you can do in the law, but to pivot and be okay with it. Even if you said your whole life, I'm going to be, and be clear, I started off with a civil rights inspiration, and ended up being a government attorney, right? Like that's where I spent the majority of my career. You don't block yourself because, I said I was going to be a civil rights attorney. And this is, even though this work is not, and I don't know how you could be a civil rights attorney and not be fulfilled and enjoy it and love it. But don't get so married to the thing or the title or the money or the perceived success that you don't find your true happiness. Because when you find your true happiness, which is rooted in a deeper thing, I think, which is your purpose. Like what is your purpose from your higher purpose. When you are aligned with that, all the success in the world will follow, and you'll be happy and you'll be fulfilled, and the things that you dream will come to you, because you're giving the service that you were put here to give. So find that joy and live in it, and share it and give it freely and openly, and it will come back to you. And so be happy. That would be my big one. Because I think it's real easy not to.
Y'all, this is the Honorable Judge Shalanda Miller, and she has graced us with her presence and her knowledge. And as you can see, I was not exaggerating when I said how humble she is. I was not exaggerating when I said how great her temperament is. And so we're very excited that you will get a chance to hear from her yourself. Please play this over and over and over. It's full of nuggets. And I would encourage you that if you want to hear more programming like this, please go on to Spotify and search for She's Got GAWL. There is a series on there, and then there are other topics that we've covered as well. And then also on the YouTube channel, you can do a search for West Georgia GAWL, and then subscribe so that you'll know when we add additional programming. I would like to end on a Judge Miller recommendation. Judge Miller says, choose happy. And so until next time, everybody, choose happy. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me.